I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Sumter School District December 14, 2020 Board Meeting.
All persons
wishing to attend
the virtual meeting
may do so via YouTube, Sumter School District Board
and
Meeting, and Sumter School District Facebook page.
due to COVID-19
and in
compliance
with recent public health orders, no members from the public will be able to attend the meeting in person.
This meeting is held
in accordance with the Freedom of
Act.
Information Act.
The news media
has been notified,
and a copy of the
and a
agenda
copy of the agenda has been made available to the public.
The mission of Sumter
The
School
mission
District
of Sumter School
is to
District
equip
is
students
to equip students to be responsible, successful,
and productive citizens
in a global society.
The Sumter School District
The Sumter School District develops and cultivates competent students who embrace diversity
and responsibly
and contribute positively to society.
Board members present
Board
tonight
members present tonight is Dr. Dave Frank Baker, Vice Chair,
Reverend Darrell
Reverend
McGaney,
Darrell McGaney,
Clerk Brian Alston,
Area 1,
Cheryl Ray,
Ray 2, Area 2,
Mac McLeod,
Area 3,
Dr. Hilton,
Area 4,
Gloria Rose Lee,
Area 6,
Area
6,
Sean Reagan,
Area 9,
Robin Mills,
Deputy
Director of
Deputy
Installation
Director of
Support,
Installation
Shore Air Force
Support,
Base
Shore Air Force
Representative,
Base Representative,
yours truly, Barbara
truly,
Jackson,
and Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, Superintendent. This meeting is now called to order. Good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Sumter School District Board meeting, my first meeting as chairwoman. Again, I am honored and humbled by my fellow board members in trusting me with the responsibility to lead and facilitate their wishes. We appreciate your attendance and commitment to education, the district, and students. Moving forward, we will continue to focus our support to the superintendent, district staff, parents, and students in building a sustainable bridge of achievement and success. Again, thank you for your attendance. Upon the consensus and with no objection, the agenda will stand approved as written. Are there any objections? Are there any objections? The agenda is approved. At this time, I invite trustees to share any announcements.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Alston.
I just wanted to share an update from the Board Legislative Advocacy Conference. All of the resolutions passed unanimously. There was lengthy discussion on two of the resolutions presented before the body. One of them was on school consolidation, and the conversation surrounded if there are multiple school districts that are considering consolidation, so the referendum that goes to the public, if one referendum fails, then the resolution states that the consolidation will not take place. The other was around school bus safety and who was to receive the citation from law enforcement in the event that a car passes a stopped school bus. As it currently stands, the driver, if they are stopped by law enforcement, will receive the citation. If someone reports a car passing a stopped school bus, then the owner of that vehicle will receive the citation. But at the end of the assembly, all resolutions did pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Olson, for that report from your last conference. We do appreciate that. Are there any other additional announcements? If not, we're now moving down to committee reports. I would like to offer the current committee chair an opportunity to provide any update or comment that they may have. Facilities.
No.
Okay, no report from facilities. Finance?
No report.
Policy?
No report from Madam Chair.
Thank you. Hearing no reports from committees, we will move to the legislative update. And I want to welcome Board Legislative Contact Dr. Hilton to provide any legislative update at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Last Monday, Reverend McGaney, Dr. Baker, Dr. Jackson, and myself met with 3 members of the legislative delegation. David Weeks, Thomas McElveen, and Merle Smith. Merle was here virtually. As you know, a list of topics have been submitted by members of the school board to be discussed with the legislative delegation, and we did that. We thank them for their efforts to expand Wi-Fi. We thank them for providing CARES money to the school district. We encourage them to continue the expansion of Wi-Fi, and I'll touch on that again in a moment. We talked about Act 388 and how it had negatively impacted public education in South Carolina since its passing several years ago. We shared the impact of COVID-19. Dr. Martin Knox was here too, I apologize. She was here too. She shared the impact of COVID-19 on the district. We talked about all the myriad of ways that it's impacted students and teachers and bus drivers and everybody in the district. We talked about our social distancing. We talked about reopening plans. We talked about how the COVID had created a teacher shortage. We're experiencing a teacher shortage anyway, but it exacerbated the problem of a teacher shortage. And we asked, and we talked about that there was not a step increase of teachers this year. And we asked about the possibility of providing some sort of a bonus for teachers this school year from some non-recurring funds that could possibly be available. We talked about putting a step increase in for next year. We also asked them to consider permanently removing the cap on the salaries of retired teachers so that we could bring back retired teachers and not have that salary cap. Because we're short teachers, we need all the teachers we can get. we thank them for the waiver and the flexibility that they have provided regarding financial matters to local school district. They were very receptive to all the things we talked about. They listened carefully. We had a good conversation with them. We talked about the possibility of a Center for Advanced Technical Studies and how that we had some discussion in the past about that. We talked about the possibility of fiscal autonomy for the school district. It was a good meeting. We had a good back and forth. They were very attentive. In many instances, they were sympathetic to what we had to say. They agreed with many of the things we had to say. In some instances, they felt like they would be able to continue to help us out, particularly with the expansion. We talked about how important it was to expand broadband, countywide, statewide, nationwide. They were very supportive of that idea, agreed with it very much. They were very agreeable about the salary cap for retired teachers. So it was a good meeting. We had good conversation. We had good back and forth. And we left the meeting all agreeing that we would like to meet more often. We'd like to have more conversation. We'd like to have more dialogue. Anybody that was there, would y'all like to add anything to what I've shared? If I missed anything, yes, sir.
Yes, I would like to just say that although we talked about teachers and step increases, I did mention as well to the legislators that we need to look at bus drivers. We need to look at everybody from the top, teachers and custodians, not only teachers and custodians, but bus drivers and so on, all the way on down. And I think the conversation came up about the technical high school or something like that. You mentioned that?
Yeah, I call it a Center for Advanced Technical Studies.
Oh, okay. And I shared my concern on that because I did mention that we have a career center as well, and I gave them my spill on that we can look at. In the past, we were saying that we can look at those monies and build our career center up because that's a good program. And my issue for that was when they were talking about it then, I mentioned the issue was not the one-time monies that we were going to get, but the operating costs moving on after that. That burden would have been on the school district, and the school district was not in a position to being able to, absorb that operating cost. And that was the reason the last time there was some hiccups for me. And moving forward, again, that will still be a concern of mine, and I shared that with the legislative delegation. The operating costs, as we know what our positions are right now, we need all the money we can now. And also I made several appeals to the delegation as to how serious this district needs some funds. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. We also talked about the nurses and how we needed more nurses, we needed to pay the nurses more. We had a good bit of conversation about the nursing situation because of the COVID. We talked about our fund balance and how things were actually much better in the district now than they were in the past, that we were making good progress in establishing a fund balance with 2 or 3 months of operating expenses in reserve, which is what a healthy district needs to have. Anything else from anyone?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Was there any, I know you mentioned that it was part of the discussion, but could you maybe talk a little more when I hear Reverend McGaney talk about the funding for the district? Was there any conversation around Act 388 or the fiscal autonomy piece when it comes to funding?
I think the best way to describe it is I would say they took it under advisement. There was that I think the general feeling is that among many legislators is that 388 is not going anywhere anytime soon. And what was the other part of your question?
The issue of fiscal autonomy for the district.
Well, I think, my takeaway is that, they had the feeling that if the voters of Sumter County if a majority of the folks in Sumter County wanted the school district to have fiscal autonomy, then that would be something that might be considered. That they didn't say that in so many words, but I'm sort of reading between the lines. That it was, again, more like they might take that under advisement, that suggestion.
Yes,
Well, it is my understanding, and maybe I was the only one who heard that, but I think Senator McElveen opposed fiscal autonomy for the board, and Representative Smith concurred with him that he opposed the board having fiscal autonomy. That's my understanding. Thank you.
That concludes my report, Madam Chairperson.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Dr. Hilton and the others that, joined in or asked questions to the legislative update. We appreciate that. Okay, we're moving on now to the superintendent's report. Dr. Martin Knox, I invite you to provide the information listed under the superintendent's report.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Chairwoman Jackson, Vice Chairman Ms. Dr. Baker, and members of the board and our Sumter School District community. If someone had predicted or shared with me last year at this time that we would be in the state that we're in as it pertains to COVID-19, I would have been challenged to determine ways in which we could best educate our children. This is something that we as a school district look forward to each and every day in terms of ways in which we can provide our children, one, with quality education, but more so in a safe environment. As we know, effective today, Sumter School District has returned back to the virtual status in terms of providing our children with quality education. And while the virtual capacity is not optimal, based on our professional opinion and the data that exists within our community and across the state and across the nation, this is the safest way for us to provide our children with the instruction they deserve, but in a safe environment for our staff and for our children. As we continue to move forward, I will make sure that we continue to communicate with our community to ensure that you are informed as to what we're doing as a school district, so that we are doing so in a collective manner while providing adequate opportunities for our parents to find daycare and other means to safeguard our children during the day. We continue to utilize social media, we continue to use EduLink, and we also partner with our local news syndicates to ensure that the information is provided to you in a prompt manner and in a clear manner. So as we continue to move forward, I just want to make sure that we all understand that we need to ensure the safety of our children, both physically and academically. But the way in which we can continue to do that is to ensure that our students are learning in a virtual capacity while using a district-issued device. And I continue to make the plea to our community to ensure that our children have a district-issued device, because there are tactics that our teachers can use, and there are ways in which we can safeguard our educational platform without interruption. If we look around the nation, there is interruption not only to educational institutions, but of governmental institutions as well, with hijacking our technology. And in order to prevent that, it is most important, and I'll say it again, it is most important that all of our children have a district-issued device. So please make sure you've made contact with your school principal or leaders to ensure that our children have the materials and tools that they need in order to be successful. To accompany that device, we need to make sure that our children who need it, who are in our rural areas, or who have interruption to the connectivity, that all of our children have MiFi devices. If your child is in need of a device, please make sure there's contact made again to your child's school. To ensure that we are continuing to move forward with providing our children with additional support, the evening reading with the superintendent will resume. We will continue to use this approach to engage our children in reading while trying to interact with them during these unusual circumstances. Evening reading will begin promptly at 7 o'clock, so please check YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I want to take this opportunity to thank our community, thank our staff, and I'd like to thank the Board of Education. Because each and every day when we make a decision, while no decisions are easy in making, we continue to look at the best way to safeguard the educational environment. And without our parents and your support, our children and their flexibility, and our staffs and their creativity, and the board with your support, we would be spinning our wheels in the mud trying to figure out what we're going to do next. But I can say with the creativity that exists with our principals, our teachers, and our staff collectively, we're continuing to move forward to do what's best for our children. So I just wanted to say thank you all for your support. And I also want to say happy holidays. This will be the first time that we have the pleasure of interacting with our community and with you all. And I want to make sure that we all have a safe and happy holiday. And while we encourage you to spend time with your families, we ask that you do so in a safe manner. The only way we can conquer this virus that's taking over our lives is to make sure that you continue to work diligently by staying 6 feet apart, wearing a mask, washing your hands, and using all those mitigating circumstances that allow us to safeguard not only our community, but our families and ourselves. So I wish you all a great holiday, and we'll see you after the new year, and I hope that yours is one of prosper. That concludes the superintendent's tour of Sumter report.
Thank you, Dr. Penelope, for the tour of Sumter report. We will now move to the general fund statement of revenue and expenditure September, October, and November 2020.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Good evening, Chairman Jackson, Chairwoman Jackson, Vice Chairman Baker, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. This evening, as we discuss the financial reports, I will present various information to provide a visual that correlates to the dollar values we are discussing. The board has been provided the September, October, and November general fund revenue and expenditure reports, and I will focus on the November reports as they are cumulative and reflect the September and October transactions. As we move forward to the next page, Ms. Hanson, do you have that displayed, the financial analysis? As I said, before we move into the November 30th financial report, you will see on this slide that there are several unknowns that remain for fiscal year 2021. The first one is the reduction in student enrollment. For November 30th, we have projected a $2 million decrease in revenue based on an approximate reduction of 440 students enrolled on the 45th day of school. We will continue to update this projection, and it will be adjusted again on the 135th day as well. The second line item of an unknown that we are currently evaluating is the potential for mid-year budget cuts. We have been told to prepare from 3 to 7% revenue reduction, which ranges from $2.2 million up to $5 million. Now, please keep in mind that when we do have a revenue reduction, it is usually not a one-year reduction, and we need to be prepared for several years of a reduction in revenue. And in this analysis, we will use the middle range of an estimate of $3.7 million of a revenue reduction. The third item is the current 2021 budget has $1.2 million of frozen positions. We use half of that figure for the fiscal year 21 unknown and a full year of that figure for fiscal year 22 in the hopes of being able to unfreeze those frozen vacancies. There are currently 26 frozen positions. This means we are operating on a reduced staffing basis. One category of frozen vacancies is building service workers. There are 11 of those positions that are needed, especially during our current environment with COVID-19. We also were in need of additional nurses and social worker positions. This is why 59% of the CARES funds were allocated for those positions. The CARES funding will allow for 2 years of positions, and then we will need additional funding to maintain those positions or they will be eliminated. Now, based just on these 3 items alone, we need to be prepared for a $11.2 million financial impact for fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 combined. Please keep in mind that these unknowns relate just to the general fund reduction. If other funding sources, such as Title I, IDEA, and other grants experience budget cuts, the general fund will need to absorb those reductions as well. The likelihood of food service revenue being lower this year based on decreased participation is also very high. We are continuing to monitor these funds and will meet with team members and will update the board as additional information is available. In order to maintain our current staffing, which is 90% of our general fund budget, we need to monitor our current year expenditures to offset these unknown reductions in revenue or utilize fund balance to cover these. If the fund balance is utilized, we then begin the work of replenishing the fund balance to once again achieve the required unassigned fund balance. Now, if you'll turn your attention to the November 30th, 2020 General Fund Revenue and Expenditure report that was provided. Several adjustments have been made to the projected revenue as of November 30th. Please refer to the 4th column, which is labeled Fiscal Year 21 Projected. The following items have been adjusted. The revenue codes 1210 ad valorem taxes and revenue code 1280 revenue in lieu of taxes have been adjusted to the prior year amounts, increasing that revenue source by approximately $1.6 million. We will continue to evaluate tax revenue based on collections. The next revenue code that adjusted is revenue code 3825, which is your new school tax credit. This has been adjusted to reflect the current amount, which has decreased from the original fiscal year 21 amount of $14.2 million down to $13.9 million. The good news is, though, this is, however, still more than our fiscal year 20 amount that was used in our budget for fiscal year 21, which was $13.5 million. As such, we have increased that budget by $483,000. The next few adjustments are the three revenue line items. The first is the projected budget cut that we discussed earlier. I used the middle range there of 5%, which is $3.7 million. Next is the projected reduction in state revenue based on the student enrollment on the 45th day, which is estimated to be $2 million. And then lastly is the projected fiscal year 20 reduction in revenue, which we knew last year, and since we used last year's budget, I needed to adjust that for the known decrease in last year's student enrollment. So that increased or decreased that revenue further by $287,000. So that takes our total projected revenue in that 4th column to $124,433,000. And that is a decrease of approximately $3.6 million from what we had budgeted. Moving on to the expenditure page. We have adjusted the payroll projections. Those are codes 100s and 200s that are the salary and benefits. And we will continue to monitor and adjust those throughout the year. These amounts will fluctuate each month based on new hires and employees that are no longer with us. If you'll see code 313, pupil services, this has been adjusted for a known increase in contract services for positions we could not fill and had to hire contract employees to cover those positions. This figure could increase if additional staffing is needed. And as you can see there, it has been increased by approximately $413,000. Next, expenditure code 470, which is energy, our utilities. That has been adjusted to the prior year actual, so that increased expenditures by $285,000. And then lastly, code 620, which is our interest expense. That was adjusted based on the fact that as loan payments are paid, the interest portion is lower, and so I was able to reduce that from our fiscal year 20 budget for what is a more realistic, and so that decreased $133,000. Now, based on the adjustments that we discussed, we are projecting a break even for the year, which means we would not have to utilize the fund balance and could maintain the unassigned fund balance. Now, moving back over to the other PDF, are there any questions before we do that?
Madam Chair, I had a question.
Yes, Reverend McGain.
Did she touch back over the contract employees? How many contract employees are we talking about? She mentioned 413,000, and could you touch back over on that again for me?
And I do not have that exact figure. I believe the question was how many positions off the contract employees covering.
Contract.
But we're getting that unless Dr. Kumis knows that off the top of his head, but I do not know that information off the top of my head.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Jennifer, I know you've gone over this with us many times about the fund balance, but I still get a lot of questions from constituents about it. Could you kind of give us just a little review of where the fund balance, where those monies come from, how much we're supposed to have, and, you know, just kind of refresh everybody on that?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. There's a law that requires a minimum fund balance of 8.33% of your operating budget of your general fund to be in an unassigned fund balance. 8.33% is approximately 10.2 million. Now that is just the minimum requirement by law to have. Industry standards recommend 2 to 3 months worth of a general fund that's unassigned, and that would range from 20.4 million up to 30.6 million. Question?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Austin?
Based on your financial analysis with the potential financial impact, potentially at the end of the 2-year mark, we could see at least 1 month of our operating expense being wiped out.
If our projections of what I'm reflecting in the November numbers do not come true, where our expenditures truly are lower than what we budgeted, then yes, we would need to utilize the fund balance. But currently, right now, I have it projected that we will cover just for the general fund reduction. Again, if there are additional reductions for other funds, we would wipe out a good portion of the general fund balance.
And is it my understanding from what you just said about where we should be or what's a good practice for the fund balance, that we're barely at the 2 months of operating expense in our fund balance?
That is correct. We are just at operating expenditure in our fund balance as unassigned.
Thank you.
Jennifer, can you go back to Ms. Ray's question and talk about maintenance of effort? You talked about the IDEA and those other factors that it could impact. Could you talk about maintenance of effort so that there's an understanding of that and how it plays in part to our budget?
Yes, ma'am. There are specific requirements for a maintenance of effort that relate to special services. We are required to maintain a minimum of what we spent in the prior year on those object codes. You have to spend a minimum of what you spent in the prior year or more. So when we look at trying to find ways to reduce the budget, there are specific line items that we are not allowed to reduce. Otherwise, we will have to pay back our special service revenue because we were in violation of the maintenance of effort.
I have one more question. What was our fund balance at the end of 2020 fiscal year, June 30, 2020?
The fund balance as of June 30, 2020, if you look at the second page of the November report,
Right.
the fund balance there shows $25,374,378. That's the total fund balance. The unassigned fund balance is approximately $23 million.
Okay, and I guess what I was really wanted to ask was, well, where was it in 2019?
In 2019, at $14,364,000.
And could you elaborate on where some of that came from to increase the fund balance?
Yes, the increase in a fund balance is a result of taking all your revenue that you received for that fiscal year less your expenditures. So if you had more revenue than expenditures, you will add to the fund balance. We were fortunate enough to come in under budget in several of our expenditure line items last year for June 30th, 2020. Part of that was because of vacancies in positions, and then the other part was watching our expenditures as we entered into the pandemic to ensure that we would save money to be prepared for budget cuts this year.
Did that answer you?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Cheryl.
welcome.
Mac has a question.
Oh, Mac, I'm
I do.
sorry.
Jennifer, I was just sitting here wondering, how does our fiscal condition compare with our surrounding districts? I just see them giving bonuses, and I know the public sees it as well. How do we compare with them? And you may not know the answer to that, but are we in a situation where we may possibly be able to do that in the near future, or are we nowhere near that, or how are we sitting?
If I'm hearing the question right, you want to know where we compare to other districts with our fund balance?
Right, and what is our surrounding districts with Lee, Clarendon, Kershaw, those?
Yes, sir. I did evaluate that this week and last week, and I can see that we are below what those districts are as far as a fund balance percentage. Of course, I do not have their fiscal year 20 information yet because the audits have not been published yet, but comparing from 2016 through 2019, we are below those districts as a fund balance percentage. So it appears that they are in the financial position to be able to provide such things that we are not able to.
Right, okay. Thank you.
I have another question. But does that include the year that we were so low in the fund balance? You went back to 2016, and does that, and of course you said you can't take into consideration 2020, so, just in your opinion, do you think we're that far below these surrounding districts?
do believe we've made quite a significant progress to being more comparable to those districts, but definitely back in 2016, we were much further apart, but we are getting closer, but we are still below, based on June 30th, 19 figures that I evaluated.
Jennifer, would you do me a favor, and I don't know if you have that document with you, because to your point, the last thing we want is not to reward or compensate our staff for the work that they do each and every day. So we have these conversations like more than anything else. And so we have done our homework to see where others are. And I ask the questions. If I don't know, I'm going to ask. So I have asked my colleagues, how have they been able to do this? Jennifer, do you have that data chart without using names? Like the graph that we did, the line graph, where it shows we're at the bottom and there are other districts like with 6 months, and can you just give a general overview of some of those? Do you have that with you?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I can see that we were at 11% of this requirement as of June 30th, and another district was at 13%, another was at 15%, another was at 18%, and another was at 55%. So they had 50%, that means they could go 6 months with their fund balance and operate if they had to use their fund balance. We were at 11%, which is slightly over 1 month.
And so the only reason, like I said, we have this information is because, thank you, Jennifer, we've been looking, even before bonuses were issued, we're constantly looking at ways in which we can work with salaries and provide bonuses to our staff. So that's why that information was at hand. Because again, I think every meeting we have, or every time I see Jennifer, there is a conversation about salaries. And so it's not a day that we don't have this conversation. So that's why we're always looking at ways in which, one, we can save on expenditures that are not required for us to run a district effectively. But again, with the goal that's established by the superintendent, being fiscally prudent or fiscally responsible, that's where we are without shortchanging our staff. But we are working diligently to get to that place where we're able to provide that compensation.
I have a question. Dr. Knox, and just for clarification, those other, based on your research, those other districts did not use the CARE funds to provide bonuses for their employees, did they? Or
From what I was informed of, they use their general fund, they use their budget to do that.
okay.
There are 12 buckets that we can utilize CARES funds for. And so what we use most of it, what was it, 59% of the CARES? Is it 59%?
Yes, 59% was in salaries for those positions. Talked about building service workers, nurses, and social workers.
And that was used to bring us up to standard so that we are safeguarding our buildings with nurses, providing that emotional support with our social workers. That's where we use most of our CARES funds for positions. And as Ms. Miller said, in 2 years, we're going to have to come to a level or a space where we can continue to provide them with salaries. If not, it could look not so good. I didn't know any other way to say that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Alston?
Since we're on the subject of the CARES funds, I'm looking at the CARES budget that was provided in the financial analysis. And if we use 50% of it for salaries, and I see the other big bucket was used for sanitation. If we had not used that for sanitation, that money, this $2.6 million that was used for sanitation, that would have to come out of our general fund to provide for. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. And let me clarify that 2.6 that you're referring to, I believe you see the green pie chart. Do you want to switch back to that part of the presentation, Amy, and pull that up on the screen? Go on a couple pages, go one more, please. right there, the 2.6 million, that does include some of those positions, the 26 custodial positions. So of that, I'd say there's probably 400, maybe 500,000 that was for PP&E supplies. That was for sanitation, that would be cleaning supplies, gloves, masks, those type of items. The other part is salaries. So salaries are included in these figures in these categories on this slide.
And to that point, not knowing when the pandemic will end, and of course, we can never go back to the way in which we used to do things. We have to plan for the continuous reissuing of PPE equipment to our schools to ensure that the buildings are sanitized and that our staff are properly guarded against any type of viral transmission.
Okay?
Superintendent, is that where I see where 872,000 of the CARES was allotted to other activities? Will that be what you just said, as far as anticipating spending of funding or what?
So yes, the other activities could include where we use some of the CARES funds for intervention support for, is that where I tutored, without mentioning a business name? Did we take it out of that purple area? Where did we take
Yes, ma'am.
I tutor from?
The other activities also include our allocation for the private schools.
Okay.
And it includes, I'm trying to get to the actual note I have on that. Other activities has $348,000 to the private school allocation. And then we did put $281,000 for additional PP&E. If we needed to, we could move that from this category if the State Department approves that. And then also you have to have an indirect cost that's required with grants. And so 243,000 of that other category is the indirect cost that's at 4.36% that's required.
Jennifer, can you also provide clarity on the expectations, and I'm probably going to answer the question that I'm posing, if you would address the expectations as it pertains to utilizing the funds for something other than what we had already built into the budget?
Yes, part of the CARES and the coronavirus relief funds is that they have to be spent on items that if we did not have COVID, we would not need. And so it's very specific that this has to relate COVID-19 and be spent accordingly. We have a budget for the CARES plan that the State Department has approved. And so if we were to change how we were to do this, we would need approval from the State Department to make that change.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Olson?
I'm not sure if this information is available or something that the administration could work on. If we were to give a district-wide bonus of, say, $500, have we calculated how much that will be for all staff, not just teachers?
So what we discussed, Jennifer, I don't know if you have those numbers in front of you. When we've been having the discussion, we looked at the cost for $1,000 for, I see you just jump over to your computer. What the fee would look like for $1,000 for all employees. And then if we took an approach as many of our surrounding districts, if we did $1,000 for full-time and $500 for part-time, we've looked at multiple ways in which to do it. And that would also include benefits. So Jennifer, I saw you jump to your computer. Can you give that number, please?
Yes, ma'am. If we took all employees a $500 bonus, that would be $1.7 million approximately. If there was a $1,000 bonus, it would be $3.4 million. And then if we split it based on part-time and full-time and gave part-time $500, that would be a total, and gave full-time $1,000, that would be $3.1 million. And that does include 30% of benefits, which is your FICA, your workers' comp, and your retirement. and that employees would need to pay FICA and retirement out of their allocated amount.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you for that, Jennifer.
And what we also provided in the, are you going to finish going through the PowerPoint or?
Yes, if we wanna, we kind of touched on some of it going over the CARES budget to the board prior, but if you'd like me to go through that and then the Corona relief funds at the very end, you just let me know what you want me to present and I'll be happy to.
So, Madam Chair, that would be your decision. We prepared all of this for the board and for our community all over again. Although we've already presented, for Dr. Lee, who never saw it before, we wanted to make sure we reiterated some of the pieces about the CARES funds. However, in my weekly update to the board, at some point I shared about the Corona relief funds because that was an additional pot. So we can go right to the Corona relief funds and not go over again what we already touched on again tonight and what we previously presented about the Corona virus relief fund.
Dr. Lee, where are you with that?
I'm fine with it, yes.
You're okay with going on just to the CARES? You understand the others, okay? What is the pleasure of my fellow board members? Are you okay with what she has done and move on to the other part of it?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we got a handle on
Dr. Martin,
Yes,
they
ma'am.
seem to be okay and she could just proceed on
Yes,
to
ma'am.
the other part of it.
So Jennifer, when you begin to talk about the coronavirus relief funds, can you talk about the timeline that we had to provide to the state when we received it? Because what I think needs to be clearly communicated is this is separate from the CARES fund, and this was an additional pot of monies that were sent to us or given to us from the state. And these had a different bucket of different buckets we could have spent this money on. So can you just talk about the timeline, when and where, and just how quick the turnaround was as well for the CRF funds, and talk about how we divvied up those monies.
Okay, I will, and Amy, if you will, Ms. Hanson, go to the last page of the PDF file for the analysis. This will be a pie chart of the Corona relief funds. And if you recall, when we did present the CARES information to the board in September, that was a Monday night, and we had just gotten word the Friday before that instead of having the surveys that we did for technology, nurses, and IT equipment, that they were just gonna give us an allocation instead. So this was the allocation they gave us instead of those surveys and what we had requested. And our allocation was approximately $1.9 million. Now, what's different about these Corona relief funds is that there are only 4 categories that it can be spent on. And again, it relates right to those surveys. It can only be spent on nurses, personal protective equipment, your PP&E, technology, and tutoring. So it was very limited on what these funds could be spent on. And then it also has to be, they were gracious enough that originally these funds were going to have to be spent by December 31st, 2020, which would only have given us a couple of months to spend the funds. They did extend that till September 2021. So we have till September 2021 to spend these funds. And based on our internal meetings, it was concluded that we needed 2 more nursing contract services because we are having trouble hiring nurses. We are engaging contract services for those 2 positions, and again, those are temporary through September 2021. And then we have allocated an additional $335,000 approximately on personal protective equipment. And then we have technology there of approximately $900,000, and then tutoring for our students of approximately $467,000.
And Jennifer, can you really quickly do one more thing for me? And I should have done this earlier. Can you talk about supplanting as it pertains to both streams of money?
We do have to be careful with supplanting, but not with the Corona relief funds. They did waive that supplanting requirement, with Corona relief funds, but with CARES and then in general, when we have our special services and our Title I funds, just because a school could utilize those funds does not mean that, oh good, we don't have to use general funds for those schools either. The way it works is, I'll use an example of paper. If we needed paper for a Title I school, we can't say, oh, let Title I buy all the paper for them. We still have to buy the same amount of paper we would have bought for that school, and then they would supplement that paper with that additional funding source. You can't supplant, you can't replace your general fund dollars. It is a federal law requirement that you have to supplement with your special revenue funds. Does that answer that, Dr. Martinox?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure there was a delineation between both pots of money.
Are there any questions on the Corona relief funds? Okay, if not, we'll move over to our capital projects update. Again, you were given September, October, November, and you were given multiple locations. I'm just gonna focus on the summary if everybody's ready to move over to that. Okay, and we're gonna look at the November. You have all 7 of the capital project funds. We go from Fund 519 all the way to Fund 525 now. I'm not gonna read all of those to you, but if you have any questions about any specific capital project funds, I'll be happy to take those.
Are there any questions?
Madam Chair.
All right, Mr. Olson?
On Fund 520, I see this money has to be spent by spring 2021, and there are several line items for R.E. Davis. I would just ask the board that we have some conversation on these capital projects at R.E. Davis. Like, are we gonna move forward on them, or is there a way to repurpose some of those funds?
Understanding the question, yes, the board could decide to reallocate those funds to another alternative use to meet the compliance of spending those funds by the spring of 2021.
Question, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Superintendent, where are we with R.E. Davis as far as, and I know about 2 years ago, there was supposed to be some changes taking place, some additionals, since we merged, since they came together, Maywood came there, and there was supposed to be some work being done there. Can you update us where we are with that? Are we completed with everything? I know we've been in a pandemic, but just for information, can you tell us where we are with R.E. Davis and what has been done?
So if I can recall off the top of my head, upon my beginning my transition as superintendent, I listened closely to the community about dialogue that had transpired prior to my arrival, and then new updates upon my entry as superintendent. And so just to come across with whatever's floating on the top of my head, I know one of the biggest concerns was the lockers. We actually had lockers installed. We transitioned the lockers from Maywood over to R.E. Davis because those lockers were pretty new. And so our staff worked diligently in getting those lockers. I personally walked through the building with the principals to identify and designate a space, not only where we can just put lockers, but they were not taking up too much space in the hallways of students, and I apologize for looking up, I'm just recalling. And so we found a space for the lockers to go. The other concern was that of the science classrooms or classrooms that were identified for students who were on the upper level of the school, and I mean upper level meaning middle school. We actually did work, and we worked with the Office of School Facilities to determine what was the scope of or the range that was required by South Carolina in the classrooms. And so we did a comparison with several of our other schools to see the space that was available in the classrooms in R.E. Davis, and they were comparable to several other schools that were designed around the same architect or the same blueprints. The other thing was there was a wall that was built to separate the elementary from the middle school based on the concerns that I heard from the community. And so that wall went up. The music room, which was utilized by elementary and middle school, was reshuffled, shall I say, to another side of the building so that the kids didn't have to cross over, the elementary school kids didn't have to cross over the middle school to get there. The only thing that is the uniforms was another concern. The uniforms were received, our football players, our basketball players, our track players, and whomever else was in need of uniforms, they received their uniforms as well. The only thing that was left, and we did an analysis, which I don't have here with me, of the number of students who are enrolled in R.E. Davis as it came to the designation of a field, a football field for the students. And I know that in the range of 20-something was the number of students who were playing athletics at that particular point in time. And what we talked about, again, is being fiscally responsible and identifying land and then putting a space for a football field and for 20 kids. And I know that I had done that analysis working closely with the principal. I believe everything, with the exception of the field, has been met to this point, and most of the work took place last year. So again, the only thing that's outstanding, I know that there was a pond issue that was brought to our attention by the community as well, but that was resolved before I arrived. There were some concerns about staffing. I believe there was a perception that because we had merged two schools, that there should have been a behavior intervention specialist as well as an instructional coach, one for elementary and one for middle. But because we are really operating on a K-8 model, you have an individual who is assigned to take on that responsibility in the building. So they were adequately staffed with the appropriate individuals to provide services and supports. What we also did was we allocated an assistant principal to the building, and we also allocated, there were concerns about safety with the kids crossing paths from one another. R.E. Davis also has an SRO at this point, but those are just some of the things I can rattle off the top of my head. And Mr. Myers is on, but he's on not through Zoom, but if there's something that I've missed, Mr. Myers, if you call me, I hope you're listening. If you call me, we can make sure we provide you with the link if there's something that I've missed. But those are the things that I can think of at this time.
I certainly appreciate the update, and my reason for asking is everything for if everything was done, it's because we're going to talk about and have some discussions on reallocating some funds. Being that it is at R.E. Davis now, I would think and hope that we make sure everything that we can get there while the money is already there, get that squared away. But certainly looking at 20 kids or whatever you said, it wouldn't be feasible and fiscally responsible to build a field for 20 kids. So I can understand that. But while the money is there, whatever needs to be done there, I would hope that school has first priority before it go out into another area. Thank you so much for that update.
And Mr. Myers, I'm sorry, sent me a message saying I covered everything, but the land remains, which is, I guess, the piece that's being discussed. The land is for the football field.
Okay, Ms. Alston, next question?
Dr. Martin, she said there were 20 students that are they playing football, or is that encompassing of all athletic programs?
So, Mr. Alston, you have me in a space. my phone is buzzing, so I think somebody maybe texted me to give me the answer. But when we did the analysis, at that time, I asked for the number of students by grade level who were participants in athletics, but I also separated from girls and boys. And I believe there were 20, but I think that I'm pretty sure that when we dug a little deeper, the principal had indicated that not all 20 were able to play sports for academic challenges. So it was even less than 20. But because this was last year, it's all, but I can provide you with those numbers if you, Amy, isn't it we have that document. If you can make sure we put it in my update, I can provide it to you in the update.
If we could look at the number of students that are in athletic programs, i.e. in football, and could we look at how many of those students are eligible to play football, and then if we know how many are actually interested in playing?
Well, we just took the number of kids who were actually playing, or who were actually interested in playing. But to your point, I believe the last time we analyzed this data, it was before the pandemic last year. And I know those numbers look quite different because middle school's not interacting athletic-wise because of the virus. But I can definitely resurrect those numbers from last year that we spoke of.
Thank you.
Ms. Ray?
I have a question on the Fund 525. The first item is the Sumter Academy renovations, and it's looks like it's gone over whatever was budgeted. Would you discuss that and tell me where I can find the details? I know you gave us a printout of all the individual schools and things, but I didn't see where that was, where it tells what those renovations are going to be.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you direct me to the form that we have?
So, yes, ma'am. It actually is a blueprint, and on the left-hand side in red, it's actually the renovations that are taking place. Ms. Hanson, can we resurrect those and give them again to the...
But do we have it on a report here, you know, where she does the locations and tells what they're doing?
So Jennifer, do you have Sumter Academy for Support and Intervention in one of the 5 reports? I know we talked about it and we worked through it. Did you list that?
Yes, that's in Fund 525, as Ms. Ray mentioned. I believe if I heard the question, are you asking where the additional fund came to cover that project? Is that what the question was?
I think she just wants to know what was done and the amount.
I just wanted to know where to find that in the information that you gave us. I think you've listed all the locations, and that's quite a bit of information, so I just wasn't sure where it was. That tells me
as far as details of what makes up that $400,000,
right.
I would need to provide that to you. The only thing you would have in all the details that I gave you is by location, and it would just show that location for that dollar amount. But we can get that detail for you.
Okay, so we haven't gotten that in a report yet about putting these funds in here for the Sumter Academy.
There was a report provided, I can't give the specific date, that it was provided to the board in terms of where we bidded and who won the bid and what we underbidded that project.
Where is that?
That's not in here. Okay. That's not in these, right? But Amy, you can pull it for me. I can get you the information.
It was in a superintendent's briefing.
Yeah, it was in the update.
It was.
Yes.
And does that give us what the breakdown is, what the 400,000 is, and then why we've gone, that was just an estimate, so we've gone over? Is that what that means?
Yes, ma'am, because what we did is, the original, plans aren't what we did. We actually scaled it back because of the usage that we plan to put into place for the building. When we talk about over the summer, utilizing that space for camps for our younger children. There was some work that was designated to be done previously that we didn't need to have done because it would still be accessed by our smallest learners. And so the original that was done was much greater than the final. And so I'll make sure that that information is received. And so Jennifer, why don't you talk about, if you don't mind, and it may address some of Ms. Ray's question, talk about the transference from functions.
Yes, we had some projects that did come in under significantly. It's very hard to project capital projects of what the exact amount is. You just hope that enough of them come in under budget to cover the ones that go over budget. And so we did have one project, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know it was in that update that was provided, that the majority of this funding came from, and then just some smaller ones that closed out. You might have had $300 left on a budget line item, and the accumulation of those smaller ones plus that large one made up the difference to cover the overage on this one because of the bid that came in.
November 20th.
November 20th. Can you just pull it and send it to the board as a whole again, please?
Okay, yes, Ms. Dawson.
If I heard Dr. Martinox correctly, for Sumter Academy renovations, you said that the bid that we went with was the lowest bid, and it was lower than the original plans for the renovation of that building?
So there's two pieces to that, Mr. Alston. When we did the bids, we under projected what the cost of the work would be. So when I talked about the plans, the original plan, if we were to go in that direction, was to destroy some walls and some other, and based on my physical walkthrough, being a tactile learner, I put my educator hat on and I was like, no, we don't need to knock this wall. We can do this with this room. This is a multi-purpose space. And so Dr. Hafner, myself, Mr. Myers, Ms. Davis, Jennifer, we all went as a collective group with the former director of the Brewington Academy. We went through and physically talked about what did we have to have versus what was an option. And so based on the previous plans that were identified, those were streamlined, so the work wasn't that extensive. And so there were other projects in the function of the 500 function that, you know, like Ms. Miller said, there were some projects that came under and we may have had 300 here, 400 there. We took those monies without asking. We took those monies and compiled them to add to what we had already allocated for the Sumter Academy for Support and Intervention. So there are two pieces, the monies that were not spent for other projects, and then you have we came under bid, we projected under in terms of the bids. We did go with the lowest bidder.
And just to clarify, those other projects were completed. We did finish those projects. This was just the remaining funding available once those projects were completed.
Yes, Dr. Baker.
I was just gonna add, when we were discussing the facilities over there, the original amount budgeted was $300,000. And the low bid came in at, I believe, $460,000. So basically you had to take $160,000 from other existing projects that had been completed but had money left over that you could apply to the $160,000 that you needed to come up with to complete the project.
Yes, sir.
So that's kind of the simplest math that
So, we're still under budgeted? We were still under budgeted? If it came in at 400, the lowest bid came in at
Yeah, you budgeted, originally you budgeted $300,000.
Right.
But the bid came in at $460,000. The lowest bid was taken and it came in at $460,000. So basically you had, whenever staff projected the cost of the project, they under projected the cost. And so that, but the 160 was covered out of already existing projects that had money left over, and they came in under what had been projected. So you were able to cover the 160 with the money left over from the, and as Dr. Martin Knox said, one of the projects, the bulk of the money came from, but then you had pieces of monies left in other projects to make it out.
That's correct. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
My professors always told me to use less words, and that was one of those examples.
I would like to add a comment to the R.E. Davis project. You're saying, I'm hearing that, funds can be reallocated, but there is still work that has not been done. And I know that the pandemic is going on, and I would hate for us to reallocate those funds and find out that after the pandemic is over and drawing of lines and all of those things that might impact that area, that because we reallocated monies, we don't have the funds to make those things possible, that whether it's 20 kids or 40 kids, but they are entitled to equal education as it relates to all other children. I would just like to be mindful of that, and you talk about the land, and you talk about the field, houses and all of those, but those kids, if we reallocate, or if reallocation is done, and right now they are using the facility at Maywood, is that facility adequate for them to do the things and do the sports that they so desperately need as a part of their educational learning, just like all other students? I'd just like to say that when you start looking at that we make sure that after everything is settled, we provide it equally for these children. Yes, Mr. Austin?
I guess this is a question for Ms. Miller probably. So this money has to be spent by the spring of 2021. What happens if we don't spend this money, if we let it sit here? Because we don't have a timeline of when the pandemic is going to be over.
If the money is not spent, you are subject to an arbitrage rebate where you have to pay back the IRS because they never taxed us on these bond proceeds. It was a tax-free bond, and that if you were able to, basically, if you're able to take those proceeds and have them sitting in a bank account earning interest, they want a piece of that money that you've been able to earn because you never paid taxes on it. So you would be subject to paying taxes. They don't call it taxes, it's a fee.
So if we repurpose the funds that are currently in this account for something else, down the line, as Dr. Jackson has alluded to, down the line, if things are subject to change and we need money for R.E. Davis, we can reallocate funds in another account for this. That's a capital projects account, correct?
You could build that into another 8% bond issuance if that was what the board would like to build into the project.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns?
Yeah, well, let me continue with mine. Okay, I remember seeing how I got the plans and stuff in our superintendent update. Do we have something in an update that I overlooked maybe about the bidding that Dr. Baker was referring to? Because I don't remember seeing, and I see the list of things that were gonna be done, but not the projected cost.
That was which one?
November 6th was the,
And November 6th, okay.
Didn't you send that, Amy? Yeah, Amy sent that a few minutes ago.
Well,
She didn't say that.
Oh, she didn't send that one?
She sent the 20th.
Very good. Which one did you send in?
the one with the plans.
Okay, Amy sent the plan. Okay.
Yeah, I remember looking at that, and I just wanted to look at the bidding part. But I've got that, if it's in November, what?
6.
Okay, you don't need to send it, I'll get it.
Do I need to send it for everybody?
Yeah, so Dr. Lee can have it if you don't mind. So send the November 6th and the November 20th, whatever that date was.
Any other questions or comments? Cheryl, do you want to get that before we move on, or?
No, you're fine, go
Okay,
ahead.
Okay. Mrs. Miller, is that the end of your report, or Dr. Martin?
Yes, ma'am, that is the end of what I had to present tonight, unless there were any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Miller, and thank all of you for your questions, and we appreciate your responses and answers to the question. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, that being said, we are now down to, the portion of the meeting that calls for the board to enter into executive session. Is there a motion for us to enter into executive session?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion, we enter into executive session for the purpose of receipt of legal advice, whether the legal advice relates to pending, threatening, and potential claims, discussion of proposed property contractual matters, discussion personnel report, employment, appointment, compensation, promotion, demotion, discipline, termination, and a release of an employment.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded that we move into executive session for threatening or potential or receipt of legal advice, whether legal advice relates to pending claims, discussion of proposed property contractual matters, and discussion of personnel report, employment, appointment, compensation, promotion, demotion, discipline, termination, and or release of an employee. Is there any question? Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll ask that you please cast your vote electronically. And
That's unanimous, correct?
is unanimous?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously, and the board is now in executive session. Recommendation that the board approve the personnel report as presented. Is there any discussion?
Was that recommending and?
Dr. Hilton.
Is there any discussion? If not, please cast your vote electronically. Okay. The motion passes unanimously. Action required for committee review and committee assignment. We will now review the committee assignments. Each trustee was asked their area or areas of interest, as well as their availability, which resulted in the following assignments. Sumter Career Center and Technology Center Advisory Board. We have two representatives. They are Dr. Hilton and Reverend McGaney. I'm sorry, McGaney. Where did I get that name? Reverend McGaney, I'm sorry.
Career Technology.
Career and Technology Center Advisory Board. Is there a motion that we approve Dr. Hilton and Reverend McGaney as representatives to the Sumter Career and Technology Advisory Board?
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve Dr. Hilton and Reverend McGaney for the Sumter Career and Technology Center Advisory Board.
So moved.
Good. Can we hear who seconded that, please?
Arnold.
Okay. All right. There is a motion and second on the floor to approve Reverend McGaney and Dr. Hilton as representative to the Sumter Career and Technology Center Advisory Board. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote electronically.
It is unanimous.
The motion passes unanimously. We will now
move to the Board Policy Committee. Our chairperson will be Brian Alston. Cheryl Ray, and will be a member, Darrell McGaney, member, and Dr. Gloria Lee, a member. Is there a motion?
Motion to support the, recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Mr. Alston as chair and Mrs. Ray, Reverend McGaney, and Dr. Lee as members of the Policy Committee. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote electronically.
It is unanimous.
The motion passes unanimously. The Citizen Advisory Committee. The chair and superintendent serve as ex officio members. There actually is no vote for this assignment, but is assigned according to policy. As we progress, trustees will be asked to submit their recommendation for community membership. So please be thinking about your nominations. Facilities Committee. Our chairperson is Mr. Sean Reagan. Our members will be Robin Mills, Dr. Frank Baker, and Mac McLeod. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
The motion has been made to approve Mr. Reagan as the chair and Mrs. Mills, Dr. Baker, and Mr. McLeod as members of the Facilities Committee. I think we second that as well, didn't we? Who was the second? Okay, well, we got the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Please cast your votes electronically.
It is also unanimous.
The motion passes unanimously. We're now down to the Finance Committee. Mrs. Cheryl Ray has been named as the chair. Brian Alston, Sean Reagan, and Dr. Johnny Hilton are the members of that committee. Is there a motion?
Motion to support it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Mrs. Ray as chair and Mr. Alston, Mr. Reagan, and Dr. Hilton as members of the Finance Committee. Is there any discussion? Please cast your votes electronically.
It is also unanimous.
The motion passes unanimously. Transportation Ad Hoc Committee. Dr. Frank Baker will serve as chair of this committee. Committee members will be Brian Alston, Cheryl Ray, and Mac McLeod. Is there a motion?
Motion to support it.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Dr. Baker as chair and Mr. Alston, Mrs. Ray, and Mr. McLeod as members of the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee.
Dr. Jackson, who made the second?
Dr. Lee.
Dr. Lee.
Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote electronically.
That is unanimous.
The motion passes unanimously. We're now down to the consent agenda. And with no objections, the consent agenda will stand approved. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the consent agenda stands approved. I'd like to say thank you to my fellow board members, our superintendent, staff, and our virtual attendees for your attendance tonight. We're looking forward to seeing you in January of 2021. We wish each of you an enjoyable, safe, and blessed holiday. Merry Christmas and good night.